Hello, everyone. Welcome to another pre-show. Gather round, gather round.
Yes, indeedio, even though it's the heat of summer, and so we have to dress lightly and coolly. I'm glad to see all of you who've done so and yet not given up one iota of your elegance. That's beautiful.
That's true. It's important.
The ladies in their summer dresses, the men in their linen suits and seersucker. Gosh, what a sight.
Whatever happened to that? You know?
What do you mean? I was in seersucker yesterday.
I
Boater hat
know,
and
but
all.
in general, I mean, that's
Oh, it's the 60s. The 60s. We let it all hang out. Ooh. See, remember, in the wintertime, in colder places, people can cover up how badly they dress with overcoats and stuff. But you can't get away with that. And summer, as you know, in California, um, is basically one long fashion atrocity. As what's that?
right. Yes. Yeah.
As large people try to stuff themselves into as little amount of clothing as they possibly can, not realizing that for them, less is truly more. So instead of trying to pour yourself into tight jeans and a tank top when you're 3 times the size you were in high school, my advice is wear something long and flowing and airy and cooling if you're a lady, and light materials and baggy if you're a man, and you're 3 times what you were in high school.
That got me to thinking. I feel like there should be some theory or rule about fashion because it's kind of cyclical. Like, each wave of fashion seems to rebel against the prior wave to some extent. At least for my lifetime, you had 80s. 80s, what you have? You had super short shorts, pretty tight stuff. And then 90s, everything turned baggy. And then you had spiky hair, no mustaches at all. I mean, that was an 80s thing. My brother had a mustache.
I remember.
And then no one did any facial hair, but then the facial hair kind of came back and people started to do goatees and a little bit of that. And then then we got back to tight clothing again, tight jeans, including on men. And then we're doing now beards and facial hair when I didn't think that was ever going to come back again. So in a
No,
strange
and
way, for me, that sort of gives hope in classy dress again because that would be a rebellion of generations of stuff.
one can only hope. I mean, I find women wearing beards today to be very disappointing. It's something I'm very much against. Women in beards.
Hmm.
I don't like it. I think it's a tendency that really needs to go away,
Are you sure they're
alongside high
women?
heels for men.
Are you sure
What's
they're
that?
women?
Oh, well, they self-identify as women. So what am I supposed to say?
Okay.
I mean, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hi, I'm Bob Smith, and I'm a chick," he's sort of teetering on high heels. He's got a beard. He's wearing a summer frock, or she is, or what am I supposed to identify the person as?
Bobby.
See, there you go. That's my point. Little Bobby Smith, who's taller than I am and could break me in two if he wanted to. So I just say yes, ma'am, and move along.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like the leading Republican front runner for the upcoming gubernatorial campaign in California is Caitlyn Jenner. What's the boy to do?
But again, there's a cyclicality to style, fashion, and attitudes. Even like one of the things that I've been harping about is how do you rebel in school nowadays? Like, what does that look like? You know?
When you get your teachers telling you to burn things, I don't know. Maybe if you burn them, that might be a sign of rebellion.
I mean, because the rebellion of our fathers is now just mainstream everywhere. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, see, I mean, that's why wokery has trampled over everything because the ground was already set for it. I mean, it was just the matches were laid, the fuses were put down, and all they needed was the spark of wokery for people who had previously been sort of brain dead and in charge to turn to utter jello. And so they have. But on a happier note, and there's always a happier note if you know where to look, I went for a walk today.
just for the sake of having a walk, a nice leisurely stroll.
No,
Oh,
no, to show an American friend of mine around Schönbrunn Palace and the park.
the Cardinals place.
And what's that?
I said the Cardinals place.
No, not Schönborn Palace. That's different. No, no, no. I wouldn't take anyone there. No, Schönborn was the Emperor's Palace, not in the downtown, which is the Hofburg, but a bit to the west. And we saw the bed where Franz Josef died, and the room where Kaiser Karl withdrew from government, not abdicated, very pointedly. It's a beautiful place, very sad. But this time, for the first time ever, I was able to stick my head into the chapel, which is a functioning church. And they were having a ceremony of some sort, which was very interesting. They sang the imperial anthem, which was nice to hear. And we got chocolate, not chocolate, ice cream in the park. Before we went to Schönbrunn, we went to the Café Dommeier for a real Viennese lunch. And I had Viennese beef soup and veal roll.
What is that? Roll?
It's like a veal loaf. It's chopped veal formed and covered with a cream sauce. And I say chopped, it's not chopped. But it's veal covered in a cream sauce, and it was really good. It was delicious. And then ice cafe as dessert. And ice cafe is ice cream, vanilla ice cream with coffee poured into it, in long glasses, topped with ice cream, not ice cream, whipped cream, not the petroleum product that we call whipped cream, like Vaseline, but real whipped cream. And it is probably my favorite summer dish now. And it's one of the redeeming features of a Viennese summer, as opposed to the hot, sticky.
You know what I just realized about you, Charles, after knowing you for 30 plus years, is you're not a fish guy.
No, not really. I mean, I eat it,
Yeah.
but I'm not. It's not my favorite. No.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Well, I'm afraid the past 10 years of your commissary helped cure me of any lingering love of fish I had. There's something about watching the same batch of fish slowly age during the. See, I don't think anybody ever understood in the commissary there at Tumbler House Tower that fish is not like game birds or steaks. You know how those are aged to improve the flavor? That doesn't actually work with fish. What you end up with is something that looks and tastes a bit like mackerel. A bit like mackerel. I mean, not really, but sort of. Very, very heavy taste, very dark look, and a smell that is sometimes indescribable.
I tell you what, speaking of this, I had the best seafood pasta dish I've ever had, last
What
week.
was
It
it?
was unbelievable. I very rarely get specials, when the waiter comes and they say, oh, today we have, this special, that special. It was fettuccine with a marinara sauce, and with it they had clams, calamari, tuna, and shrimp. And they had cooked it all together, and when they gave it to me, it was all in this big giant foil packet, and then they put it out, took it out of the foil packet, and it was just so heavenly. I just couldn't believe it. I was in awe.
Well, it sounds good. I mean, look, there are some fish dishes I do enjoy. Shrimp and grits comes to mind.
Interesting. I've never heard of that
Yeah,
one. I mean, I
it's
know. Yeah.
it's a southern thing.
I okay. People are gonna yell at me, but I've never actually had grits because I've never actually been to the South.
I have and I have. And in fact, I was many, many years ago when I was on a trip with some pals from NMMI. We went eastward into Texas and points east into the heart of the Deep South. Then we stopped at a roadside diner for breakfast, and they all ordered hash browns, and I ordered grits. And the waitress said that'll be one order of grits for the gentleman and four orders of hash browns for the Yankees.
uh,
My friends gave me a dirty look for some reason. I don't know why,
that's
but
good.
the no, it's I like grits. I don't get them in I don't get them in Vienna, Frank. I don't get them in LA either. But
What are they, like
I
a cornmeal thing or something like that?
yeah, it's sort of a ground floury thing.
Yeah,
Uh, Hominy grits.
yeah.
It's corn, yeah, and it's good. It's a very distant nod to our own New England Indian pudding, which is made with cornmeal and molasses. But we use grits you eat anytime, although particularly for breakfast. But Indian pudding is definitely a dessert.
Hmm.
But they are related. I mean, one thing you got to bear in mind is that corn, Indian corn, maize, made a big revolution in the colonists' diets, and not just the English colonists. I mean, the French and the Spanish. Everybody, corn heavily affected their diets.
Because it's so easy to produce and it's so high caloric, which was great back in the day, right?
All that, and also they didn't have it in Europe
Hmm.
because it's native to North America.
I see.
So, that's why you got everything from corn tortillas to and of course my favorite corn nuts.
Ha 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 ha.
What do you ha ha ha? I love corn nuts.
Well, what about? Oh, well then I get to mention my favorite and your favorite, candy corn.
Yes, candy corn. Halloween is. See, now that the summer has hit, my mind is officially turning toward Halloween
Good.
and the autumn and the cool. Summer here has just begun the past couple days, and I'm already ready for autumn.
I love the summer. We're very different on that. You love the fall. I love the summer.
Well, that's because I was a mushroom, when I was born, and you're a citrus.
I guess so. I guess that's very true.
Ah,
All right.
let's see what kind of questions
Let's
we
see
got.
what kind of questions. But this was fun, Charles. All right.
Yeah,
Question from Michael. He says, "Thank you for answering my question in brief.
you're welcome.
Um, since Charles could not remember off the top of his head, would it be possible for him to respond in kind when he can of the list of books on the history of the Holy Land and Palestinian region? If unbiased doesn't exist, it would be fine to have both perspectives." If I remember correctly,
Well,
you said it's difficult to have an unbiased book on this topic.
very, but I will offer The Glory of the Crusades by Steve Weidenkopf, Weidenkopf. The Crusades from Ignatius Press, which I think is a very, good book. It's what's the word I want? It's called The Crusades, and believe it or not, gosh, my mind is going. Uh, and I would recommend also. It's another book. I can't seem to find it, but never mind. In terms of the Holy Land as a whole, believe it or not, I would recommend Donald Atwater's Attwater, The Christian Churches of the East, Volume 1, Churches in Communion with Rome, which is not in communion with Rome, because he goes into a great deal of detail about the Christians in the Holy Land and what they went through and so forth, which I think is, very, very important. The other thing you want to do is go to the website of the Custody of the Holy Land, which is the Franciscan body that basically runs the shrines, the Catholic shrines in the Holy Land, and read what they have to say about their history, which is fascinating. One of the things you'll learn, for instance, is that although Louis XIV, who is not entirely happy making because of his allying with the Protestants and the Turks against the Habsburgs, nevertheless, is responsible for the survival of the Catholics in the Holy Land, because being allied with the Turks against the Habsburgs, they were obligated to give him some things in return, and that was how he managed to protect the Catholics in the Holy Land. So, had it not been for that, sadly, it might be very, very different. In terms of Arab-Israeli stuff, it's very hard to get anything that's unbiased, because the Jews have been through the Holocaust. Then they came out of the sea after World War II and dispossessed a lot of Palestinians who didn't appreciate it, and who retaliated in various unpleasant ways. And said retaliations were met with more of the same on the part of the Israelis. And then after the 1967 war, the Israelis began the policy of Jewish settlements in the conquered territories of the West Bank and Gaza, which, the whole thing's a mess. And frankly, my considered opinion is that there's only been peace in the Holy Land when it's been imposed from outside. But anyone who's going to impose it from outside has to be prepared to go through a lot of guff to maintain peace.
That makes sense. That you have someone else sort of manage the two parties or the two sides. But so the two sides have never sought out such a plan?
No, not when the radicals on both sides would like to destroy the other completely.
Oh, no, that's true.
It gets hard. Compromise is difficult on that basis. I want to destroy each and every one of your evil devil's spawn and make you die. Oh yeah? Same to you, and double, and your mom. When you're at that level, it's hard. And so, the third party that comes in from the outside, has to be able and willing to smack a lot of heads. Because, if you can't please everyone equally, the closest thing is to displease them equally. And to be able to say, one more word out of you. No, you shut up. One more word out of you, and I will smack you down, moron. Now it's your turn, moron. Any more out of you, and you get the smacking, all right? Are we clear? I've laid down certain rules, morons, and if you deviate them and go after each other, you'll wish to God you were never born. Are we clear on this? Good. Now go about your business and play nice. That's the only thing you can do. But, it's what the British tried to do under the Mandate. Although they favored the Muslims, it's what the Ottomans were stuck trying to do. The Latin Kingdom and the Byzantines were all put in the same position. And the Romans. It's a hard place to rule. But I'm willing to try. So if everyone would do a GoFundMe for a renewed Latin kingdom of Jerusalem with myself as Latin king, I am willing to make a go of it, to try.
What's the goal amount?
Goal amount? I should think 750 billion would do it.
Okay, whoever starts it, put the number at 750 billion.
Let's see if we get it. And if we do, I'm going to recruit a picked force of Twitter people, renowned for their ability to insult, to persecute, to troll, to cancel. And they will be my shock troops. What? They're going to hit the beaches, computers in hand. Just, well, maybe they'll be their phones, but they'll be twittering away at the Israelis and the Palestinians, and we'll clean everybody's. What? No? You don't seem very impressed by the first Twitter rifles.
I need to see the schematics on those.
Well, it's hard because 4/5 of them are anonymous.
I see.
Most of my Twitter minions, I don't even know who they are, their names.
Oh, rifles as in, like, people. Oh, okay, like hired guns. Okay, I thought you meant, like some digitalized weaponry.
Yeah, no. The rifles, like, the first Rifles Regiment. The Johannesburg Rifles. So it'd be the first Twitter Rifles Regiment, made up of hand-picked Twitters. Each of them able to insult, as I say, to cancel, to troll, to bully, to persecute, as they do in normal life.
Good.
And there won't, by the time those boys are done, and chicks, we're very, we can't tell which they are anyway because they're all anonymous, but they will clean the clocks of both the Israelis and the Palestinians, and the Holy Land will have peace restored to it.
Excellent. That sounds like it's a very unique plan, Charles. Thank you.
Well, we got to channel all that energy into productive venues, and I think freeing the Holy Land would be a good way to do it for them.
Okay.
And it would help ensure their eternal salvation. What before would be a lack of charity that might take them to hell will be the zeal of a holy warrior.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So. A bunch of questions from top floor executive Jonathan.
Well, you're a top floor exec, John. I'm only a lowly talent, so I'll take what I'm given. What's on your mind?
He says, Mr. Charles, would you consider writing a sort of sequel for your Blessed Karl book about Otto von Habsburg?
I would love to, but, there'd have to be a demand for it. There has been a book in English about him already. I suspect that if I were asked to write, if a publisher asked me to do such a book, I know sufficient people, etc., who knew him, including members of the family and so forth. I could probably put together a pretty good book on him, I think. But, that's in the hands of publishers, not in my hands. I don't choose those things.
What was the significance of the Battle of Tours?
The significance was that, I think it was in 732, the Muslims had swarmed over the Pyrenees and were in the midst of gobbling up France as they had gobbled up Spain. But they were defeated by the mayor of the palace of the Franks, Charles Martel, at the Battle of Tours, and driven back. And had it not been for that signal victory, France might well have undergone the invasion it's undergoing now, centuries before there really was a France. What?
So it held it back. It held back the invasion for a couple centuries, but the invasion is happening now.
Well, not a couple centuries. It held back the invasion for a millennium plus.
Oh, millennium plus. Excuse me. Well, what year? did this happen?
732, I think.
Oh, wow. I thought. So France wasn't even a nation.
Well, not
I
really,
mean,
no.
yeah, not. Wow. Okay.
So
Whew.
because of that, France was able to develop into a nation free from that particular problem until our own day. Will a Charles Martel arise? Why not? Oh, I don't know. Will we have paladins, or will we have what my French friends called Islamo-gauchists? We'll see.
Okay.
That doesn't mean Muslims who are poorly behaved are gauche. It means members of the left who are quick to snuff out anything Christian, but suck up to anything Muslim.
Boy, are they in for a surprise.
Yeah, I think so. And they'll deserve it.
Okay.
What
Uh,
what else we got?
which country has more support for a monarch restoration, Portugal or Brazil?
That's a good question, and the answer is I'm not sure. In Portugal, the Portuguese Monarchist Party has actually been in the government several times over the past few decades. And although there's another fellow who's tried to claim the throne, it's pretty clear that there's only one claimant to the Portuguese throne, and that's Dom Duarte Nuno, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting once or twice. Brazil, there are a lot of monarchists, sufficient that they were able to get a referendum on the monarchy in 1993, although it failed. There's a dynastic dispute between two branches of the House of Orleans Braganza that is the Brazilian imperial house. But there are a lot of Brazilian monarchists and a lot of Portuguese monarchists, and I wish them all well. Both Portugal and Brazil regaining their monarchs would be a great thing for the world.
Isn't Brazil kind of better off politically right now? They're doing.
Well, the president seems to be a lot better than the scumbags running Portugal.
Yeah.
I mean that in a nice way, of course, when I say scumbags. It's not meant as a pejorative.
Yeah.
No. But, yeah, I suppose so. But in terms of where the monarchist cause is healthier, I really don't know enough to say. All I know is what I read on websites, which isn't enough to give you a real honest appraisal. The Causa Real is the big Portuguese monarchist group. And then there's if you look up Casa Imperial do Brasil, Brasil, you'll learn a lot that way.
All right.
And Casa Real Portugal.
Why do they spell it with an S? Why don't they spell it right like America does? All right. Next question.
Brazil. Da 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 dee 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 da dun 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 dee 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 dun 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 dun. I can't. You see, you've got the melody and the rhythm at once, and I can't really do it. But that's the song Brazil.
Got it. Okay. Question from Zane, who's been in the secretarial pool for a year now. Congratulations, Zane, and thank you so much.
He still won't wear a bouffant.
No.
I think he's taking the right stand, personally. I don't think he should wear a bouffant.
Perhaps. Okay. May Charles share what he knows about red masses?
He sure might. Dun 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 Brazil. Da 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 dee 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 dun 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 dun. You'd rather hear about the red mass than see me mambo in my chair.
Yes.
All right, fine. I don't care. Obviously, if a taste for the fine arts is not present in your generation. All right, the red mass is a mass of the Holy Ghost, a votive mass of the Holy Ghost, traditionally said at the opening of the legal season in medieval Europe, the legal year. In London, this would be said at the Temple, where the lawyers were to be found. And in Paris, it would be said at the Sainte-Chapelle, that was built by King Louis. In time, the custom sort of, obviously, the English-speaking world had died. It continued in the French and Spanish, I guess, to a degree. But it was really revived in the 1920s and 30s by various Catholic law groups in Britain and America and Australia and Canada and so on. The biggest and most famous one in the United States is held every year at the Cathedral of St. Matthew in beautiful downtown Washington. It's notable because the Supreme Court attend, and very often the president, because this is for the lawyers and judges, these red masses. Now, obviously, it's a matter of some prestige to have the Supremes attend with the president of the month. But considering how little either of those august people usually listen to the faith, I've always wondered if it wasn't a little bit hypocritical to have SCOTUS and POTUS, their hands red with the blood of infants. I mean, there's your red mass for you, all right.
Mm.
Now, in LA, interestingly enough, the red mass is a big annual deal. The judges attend in red, red robes. And of course, the priests wear red because it's a mass of the Holy Ghost. On the one hand, I'm all for the idea of the red mass as sanctifying the legal year, calling the Holy Ghost down on the judges' decisions and all that. But when you consider how the judges actually rule, I just wonder if they should be doing it, especially with our own Supremes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a little bit like the Al Smith dinner, in the sense that, is it really a means of trying to get them to see the faith, or are you just trying to be buddy-buddy with evil people?
All right, Zane has another question. He says, is it true that lust is the least of the 7 deadly sins? How is this possible? Aren't they all equally bad?
Well, they are, in one sense, they're equally bad. And certainly lust is the easiest of them all. It's something we all share, and it doesn't require a great deal to fall into. But pride, anger, etc., etc., I mean, objectively speaking, sin is sin is sin. Subjectively speaking, some I think are worse than others. But people have written extensively on this very issue, and I can't remember what they've written, so I'll just close my remarks with that. Lust is not considered, as a rule, the worst of sins, the highest, but because it's the easiest. I mean, more people, I think was said at Fatima, I could be wrong, go to hell because of sins of the flesh than any other, just because they're the easiest.
It was said that. That's what I was going to say. Cause,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the perception that because it's so ubiquitous.
Well,
I love being able to throw that word out there, ubiquitous. But
ubiquitous, and because it's ubiquitous, it's and encouraged in our society.
Yeah, then it's lesser because it seems like because it's so common that it's a lesser thing, and
so it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, shacking up is perfectly respectable today. But what is shacking up really?
Let's just talk about sin some more, because it's so fun talking about sin. No,
especially other people's, not mine.
Just thinking about it a little bit in terms of what's the least, the least of the 7 deadly sins. At least for my personal confessions and stuff, I always thought that anger might be the least because it's hard to get at least from what I've read, it's hard to get that mortally sinful, where lust turns mortally pretty quickly, in my opinion. Or not in my opinion, but from what I've read.
It does. It does and can. Although anger, if you put your will and heart and soul into it, anger can become really, really mortal.
But that's to me, that's extreme. Like when you put your heart and soul into something out of anger, like.
Oh, it's not that extreme. I mean, a lot depends on the kind of person you are. I've known people who immediately they get crossed, they start plotting all sorts of terrible comeuppances, and those are mortal sins. That kind of vengeful spirit. Now, mind you, my personal favorite among the deadly sins, in terms of what I practice most frequently, is sloth, which is a very difficult sin because it's so easy to conceal. And it, unless you're slothful to the point of you're starving and losing money, people don't really notice it. So there's not a lot of opprobrium.
This is turning into a great discussion. Let me just grab this book that is right next to me. This is such a great discussion because it allows me to plug more books.
Oh, how much does this one cost?
So this is a new one we just add from Angelico Press. Not an impressive title, Acedia or Achadia, and its discontents. But I love the subtitle for this one: Metaphysical Boredom in an Empire of Desire.
That does sound
that hooks me. Like I will read this book because of that subtitle right there.
How much is the? Isn't that nice? Look.
That's your hand.
Yeah, that's great. The camera slipped. Anyway, but you were looking away and you would have missed it. And our pre-show audience would have thought you weren't on the ball, but now you've been caught up to snuff with them, so it's good. No, is it $25?
This one is, I think it's $16. So you're gonna have to buy something else with this one. But there's so many things to choose from in the Tumbler House bookstore. I'm sure everybody will be able to do that.
If you bought something and say it was $10 or more, what would that get you?
That'll get you free shipping and handling, Charles. Can you believe that?
I can. Free shipping and handling?
Absolutely.
While supplies last.
Limited time offer.
Be the first on your block to have Exadia or Boredom in the Empire of Desire. Wait until your neighbors see you reading it as you walk down the street. Be the first on your block. Operators
are standing by, not an actor.
That's right.
All right, so
no CODs. Sorry.
The now I think this is a great discussion. You bring up sloth because that is, I believe, the Thomistic approach to the 7 deadly sins. Like that's his list, right? Isn't it?
I think so.
Now. According to Sol Schertz's Sin Revisited, she takes it from the Desert Fathers, and the Desert Fathers had a slightly different list, and one of the areas where it differs is for this. You say sloth, but then they say acedia.
Acedia.
And which is not
it's not the same.
It's not one to one.
They're connected. They're sort of cognate, but they're not identical.
And if I remember correctly, I think a big part of acedia is a fear of the cross, a fear of suffering. That's why it's the path of least resistance. So that creates a slothfulness, and you're just afraid of suffering, so you just don't do anything. Which speaks to me, because that's me in space.
Too.
Yeah. Where was I going with this? I don't know. That's just one of the. Oh yeah, I know where I was going with this. So, in terms of sloth being the least, the least of the sins? See, how does sloth get mortally sinful?
Well, sloth gets mortally sinful. Frankly, I think as much through sins of omission as commission. when you don't do the good you should do.
I guess my point is it would be harder to discern because, like with anger, it's like, oh, okay, I hit this point. With lust, it's like, wow, I really hit this point. With, well, I guess some of these others, yeah.
Sloth would require, for me, a lot of effort to hit the point.
Oh, I see what you did there.
And although I have to say that one of the great things about sloth is that you can't use it to combat other sins. Because most sins require a great deal of effort. That's true. Hey, you know what? That hot chick over there, I think she wants to make some time with you. Yeah, I know. But I don't really feel like right
now. Oh, wow.
I just kind of sit at home and relax. I'm not really. And of course, with anger, sloth smashes anger right out of the way. Aren't you angry at that man? Well, it doesn't really matter. It's fine. Whatever.
I think those fuchsia pills aren't helping your problems with sloth.
No, fuchsia pills. Quite the contrary. I mean, fuchsia pills just ignite sloth like nobody's business. To the degree sloth can be ignited, the fuchsia pill will do it. Did you get a lot of feedback on fuchsia pills? Did anyone want me?
I remember Luke did not like it. I remember Luke, longtime fan. Yeah, and I think he's a patron. It's kind of annoying voice. It's kind of like something, it might be fun in small doses, but then, it keeps going on, and it's like, this is like nails on chalkboard,
So, like, a whole hour of this would, like, not really be entirely welcome?
Right. All right.
Okay, I understand.
All right, let us move on.
All right, what else we got?
We're going to finish the pre-show with 2 questions from Dwarf of Alexandria.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
It's only about yay big. Okay.
We've got people with cool names. Philip the Good of Burgundy, Dwarf of Alexandria. I remember Don from Florida was going by a more exotic term for a while. My favorite, though, is German Conquistador. I think that's like...
That's a good one.
I love that one. Because that just takes your mind places. All right. Anyhow, Dwarf of Alexandria says, howdy, I have a neighbor who is a World War II vet and actually saw Pope Pius XII in person.
Huh.
He has a hypothesis that many bad priests of the 60s and 70s were the fruit of men going to seminary to avoid the World War II draft. Sir Charles, have you ever heard of such an issue being proposed as a tailwind for the contagiousness of the spirit of Vatican II? If so, would you elaborate some, please?
I haven't at all, but, I like to say that no single factor creates an historical event, that they're a combination of very different things, and if one of them hadn't been there, it would have been different. But I think the thing your friend cites makes a lot of sense that it would have been a contributing factor. I mean, we know, for instance, that the Communist Party did get some of their young people to go into the priesthood and religious life. But probably, the slackers and all that of wartime, they would have been a non-ideological component. Non-ideological, but also very much deficient in the faith department. And so I think it's something that bears thinking about. I really do. And thank you very much for that.
I kind of don't like thinking about it because that decision would involve a complete and utter lack of respect for the vocation in general and all the vows that come with it. Like, oh, yeah, lifelong vow of chastity, poverty, obedience.
I hate to invoke history, but we know that at different times during the church's history, she has been assailed by a lot of clergy who have been just like that. And of course, if it can happen in history, there's no reason it shouldn't happen in your time. It doesn't mean you have to like it, of course. But I mean, think of the pornocracy. 100 years of these popes whose mistresses and mothers dominated the thing and decided who would be pope. You think the pornocracy popes took their vows very seriously? I doubt, but they certainly took them. And of course, what sort of curia do you think a pope like that would appoint? He'd surround himself with similar pervs and criminals like himself. And I'm sure they all took their oaths very poorly. The church goes through these things at times. I mean, I'll put this another way. You know that you've got all sorts of illnesses present in your body right now, but your immune system is functioning, and so they don't bother you. But from time to time, when for whatever reason you're weaker, your immune system is down, this, that, whatever it might be, you get sick from one of these things that normally is not a problem for you, but it is now because of the circumstances. Well, similarly, the church always has a certain number of bad apples riding along in the tree, but normally they're kept in place by various things, ranging from mere human discipline to the grace of God. But in some periods, just as with you getting sick, for whatever reason, the normal immunity fails and the body is overrun with these bacilli who are just, I mean, some of them are disgusting, some of them are just lazy, some of them are bureaucrats by nature. And they dominate the church for a while, and then there's a trauma of some kind, and there's a shock to the system. And for a while, there's a period of reform. And for the most part, the dogs get either chased out or subdued. And you have a period of revival and new religious orders and all sorts of exciting stuff until eventually the next crisis overtakes us. Of course, one day this cycle of crisis will end with the world.
So it sounds like a cyclical thing where where it's ups and downs, but then
ups and downs, except that it's going toward the end of time.
So we're approaching, incorporating Desjardins' principles. We're approaching perfection. So it's up and down.
Not exactly perfection.
Oh.
Our Lord said, "Think ye when the Son of Man returns, he will find faith upon the earth?" I say we are approaching the last days, not the omega point. But I hope for Teilhard de Chardin that he himself hit the omega point.
Okay. The final question for the pre-show from Dwarf of Alexandria. Howdy, I'd be interested what both of you would propose for this task. Planning out the best course of life for raising a prince to be a good Catholic king. What kind of schooling, recreation, work, and modes of piety would you encourage? Of course, much would vary based on the young man in question, so steer this topic wherever you will.
Well, of course, Bishop Bossuet gave Louis XIV a very detailed plan for raising his son. And there are certain things that need to be incorporated in a prince's education. His religion, of course, very, very important. The history of his country and the other nations of the world. His own family history. He needs to understand the tradition he comes from. He needs to understand how the government he's going to preside over works, the customs and so forth of his people. He needs to have military training. He needs to understand the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, if he has one. The military aspect of a young prince's education is very, very important, as is the physical. He needs to be physically fit. Hunting is a great way for young princes to get and stay fit. I know, hunting, it's so bad. It's awful. Prince William hunted with his daddy, and it was just dreadful. I could just scream. Well, fortunately, weenies should not be trained to rule countries, and rulers of nations should not be trained to be weenies. weanieism needs to end. The other thing is he has to know the laws, the judiciary, and all that. In other words, he has to have a very wide-ranging education because his role is very wide-ranging. So he should know about literature and so on and so forth. So it's not easy to raise a future monarch, but it can be done since it has been done. The other interesting thing that the Habsburgs did is that every member of the family was expected to learn a trade. Clockmaking, beekeeping, leather tanning, blacksmithing. And they were expected to become fairly proficient at it. Now, this, of course, was not so they could earn their living in that way, but so that they would be in touch with the lives of their people.
Outside of learning about the military, what percentage of the prince's education would mirror the education of any young man today, or should mirror?
Well, other than the military, maybe, I don't know, if young men today were educated, which is a rule they're not, 40%, 50%.
Okay.
But, there's a lot more the prince needs to know because he has to know how to run the machine he's going to be inheriting.
I see.
And of course, there has to be a great deal of attention paid to his spiritual and character development.
Well, that's what I'm saying, as opposed to other men where...
Well, other men should have character development, and they should have religious thing, but it's really ultra important that the heir to the throne happen.
Okay.
Because if you and I are either or both irreligious and stupid, although we may be elected president easily enough, it would be a disaster if we inherited the throne.
I see. Okay. Very good, Charles. That will do it for the pre-show, everyone. A nice, healthy 50 minutes, it looks like. Pretty enjoyable. Good topics, good discussion. But stay tuned. There's more.
There is. So you just stay right there, those expensive, recently upholstered seats. Not that I'm mentioning how much it cost Tumbler House, but they weren't cheap. Sit there, enjoy, especially enjoy the cocktails to be brought out shortly in between, and get ready for the regular show. Take care.